and he's just gone on to Ohio.
We're taking you live now to Melbourne with the Treasurer, Josh Frydenberg.
Economic recovery is well underway. The Reserve Bank has upgraded their forecasts for Australia's economic growth and for our labour market. And this followed positive economic data this week. We saw today consumer confidence increase for the 9th straight week to take consumer confidence levels back to where it was in early March. We've also seen job ads up this month by more than 9%, and we've also seen loan approvals up by 5.9%, with particularly strong numbers for new loan approvals for new home construction, off the back of the Home Builder program and other government incentives. The decision by the Reserve Bank of Australia today to cut the cash rate down to 10 basis points and to target the 3-year bond yield at 10 basis points complements the economic support that the Morrison government has provided the Australian economy. The Reserve Bank made it very clear in their statement today that their moves today complement what the Morrison government announced in this year's budget, particularly supporting job creation and our economic recovery. We have committed, as a government, some $507 billion, both in direct economic support and balance sheet support. That's the equivalent of around 26% of GDP, and it's in stark comparison to just a 3% of GDP commitment by the states, and that's all the states put together. So we realise that today's announcement will reduce the cost of borrowing, and today's announcement by the Reserve Bank will reduce the cost of borrowing and is good news for households, good news for small businesses, and it will complement what the Morrison government has already undertaken to support job creation across the economy. It's my expectation that the banks will now look for ways to pass on those rate cuts, pass it on to small businesses and pass it on to mortgage holders. Are there any questions?
We've got Fee from Channel 9.
Okay.
Fee?
This is actually Emma, her colleague from Channel 9 Treasury.
Hi, Emma.
My question is, if this is passed on in full by the commercial banks, as you are hoping, what would it mean for someone with a $400,000 mortgage, for example?
Well, someone with a $400,000 mortgage, which is about the average mortgage across the country, the combination of what we've seen from early this year to today's announcement, when it's come down from about 75 basis points down to just 10 basis points, that's worth about $1,000 a year to somebody with a mortgage of that size. Some of the banks have already priced in today's announcement by the Reserve Bank. It had been highly forecast and highly expected. That being said, the banks no doubt will look for other ways to pass on this lower cost of borrowing for them, whether it's for small business loans or whether it's for fixed mortgage rates as well.
Jen?
Yes, Jen from 7 News. Lever says that the Reserve Bank has to step in and do the heavy lifting because the Morrison government's not doing enough. Is that correct? And is this a vote of no confidence in your handling of the recession?
Sorry, who said that?
Sorry, it's Jen from 7 News.
But who put that proposition?
Labor, the Shadow Treasurer, Jim Chalmers.
Well, if Jim Chalmers was a horse, he'd be running in a Group 3 and coming last. And he would be put out to pasture, which probably would be the best course of action for his leader, Anthony Albanese, right now. The reality is no one's listening to him. What they're focused on is the measures in the budget. And the budget supported job creation across the country. We've seen in the last 4 months, 446,000 jobs being created. 60% of those jobs have gone to women, 40% have gone to young people. We saw consumer sentiment up in the budget month by 11.9%. That was the single biggest increase in consumer sentiment in a budget month since the series began back in 1974. And today we've heard again that consumer confidence has been on the rise 9 straight weeks, and Australia's AAA credit rating has been reaffirmed. You only have to look at the statement itself from the Reserve Bank. It is crystal clear. Their announcement today, in their words, complements the significant steps taken by the Morrison government in this year's budget to support job creation and our economic recovery. Our economic recovery, which is now underway.
Emma?
Yes, Treasurer, you say the economic recovery is now underway. The Reserve Bank Board said it's not expecting to increase the cash rate for at least 3 years. So I guess does this indicate that this recovery, it'll be a long recovery?
Well, they made clear as well in their statement that it's going to be a bumpy road and it's going to be a long road. And we know that because the Australian economy has been hit by the biggest economic shock in more than 100 years. Let's not forget that early on in this crisis, 1.3 million Australians either lost their jobs or saw their working hours reduced to zero. And we all have that picture imprinted in our minds of those long queues outside Centrelink as people lost their jobs and feared for their job security. But now, with the significant support from the Morrison government and the suppression of the virus across the country, the jobs are coming back. And they're coming back in all sectors across the economy. Obviously, with international borders remaining closed and some of the state borders remaining closed, tourism and aviation will continue to feel the pain of the virus. But in other sectors across the economy, we're seeing some positive signs as jobs are coming back and restrictions are eased. But it will be a long, hard and bumpy road for the Australian economy and indeed for the global economy.
Jen?
Will you still not commit to budget repair until the unemployment rate falls below 6%?
We've made it very clear in our fiscal strategy that there are two phases. And the first phase is to continue with that targeted and temporary support so that we can get the unemployment rate back comfortably below 6%. And then we move to the next phase, which is the fiscal sustainability. They move together and what they both phases depend on is strong job creation. The budget was all about one thing, creating jobs. Jobs, jobs and more jobs. That has been our focus. And let's not forget, when the Morrison government in February was before the COVID pandemic had really hit, it had 5.1% unemployment across the country. And that was a reduction in the 5.7% unemployment when the coalition first came to government. Obviously, with this pandemic being hitting the economy, the unemployment rate has gone up. And the expectation is that next year it will start to trend down.
Last question, Emma.
I can take other questions.
Another one from me on another matter, please, Treasurer. Are you able to respond to the terror attack in Austria?
Oh, these were devastating pictures and a devastating story of yet more lives being lost. Whether it's the attack in Vienna or recent attacks in Paris and in Nice, these attacks have a constant thread. They're barbaric and they're acts of terrorism. And they're committed by people who don't respect our rule of law and certainly don't adhere to our values. So we need to continue to be vigilant and continue to respond both with law enforcement and intelligence agencies and all those various steps that we take, but also continue to promote education and a message of tolerance, not hate.
Can I just ask one more on the rates, please?
Yes.
The low interest rate is another hit to savers. What can be done to help them, particularly retirees, and will you look at perhaps reducing the upper deeming rate or the lower deeming rate?
Well, as you know, Jen, we have reduced the deeming rates substantially. The lower deeming rate was at 25 basis points ahead of today's announcement. We'll continue to monitor that very closely, understanding that while today's news is good news for borrowers, whether they're small businesses or households and families with a mortgage, it's also tough news for savers, people who put money in the bank. And so we'll continue to monitor very closely those deeming rates, recognising that the Coalition's track record has been to reduce those deeming rates consistent with the interests of senior Australians and other savers across the community. Thank you.
Any more questions?
Thank you.
No, thank you.
And that's the Treasurer Josh Frydenberg in Melbourne there. He says